Hello, I'm Tania Unsworth with a sneak peek at my latest book, The Time Traveller and the Tiger. I want to tell you about something that happened when I was writing this book. I went a little bit mad. This is what happened. There's a lot of stuff about tigers in the book, and I knew that I had to do a bit of research on them. I thought I'd get a couple of books, make a few notes, and that would be it. Well, the trouble was, the more I read about tigers, the more interested I got in them. And the 2 books soon became 5, and then 10, and then 15. And then when I'd run out of books to read about tigers, I started watching documentaries about tigers, and all day scrolling through YouTube clips of tigers, and listening to recordings of tigers growling and roaring. And I was having a really great time. But there was just one little problem. I wasn't actually writing the story. All I was doing was researching tigers. Every page in my notebook looked a little bit like this one. Lots of facts about tigers there, some drawings of tigers, nothing at all about my story. And then I got it into my head that the only way I could write the story was if I actually went and saw a real wild tiger for myself. That was the only way I was going to do it. I convinced myself. So I went to India and I spent a week driving around tiger reserves, hunting for tigers. And I found them. And it was probably the most amazing thing I've ever done in my life. It was so amazing that when I came home, I was finally able to sit down at my desk and write the story at last. I wanted to put all the excitement I felt about tigers into the story so that you too would feel a little bit of it. I'm going to read a chapter today which is all about the tiger in the story. It's chapter 10, and it's a point in the story where it's the first time we've seen the tiger, and it's a point in the story where he's in a bad way. He's been attacked by hunters and only narrowly escaped. And he's been wandering the forest for hours and hours, trying to work out what happened to him. So chapter 10. The tiger ought to have seen them well before they saw him. He ought to have been able, had he wanted, to come within an arm's length of them, hidden in his own striped shadow, betrayed by nothing but a brief shiver of grass. Instead, he had simply walked into the meadow, moving in the way of all tigers, each massive paw placed outer edge first, each step a decision, the weight of his long body shifting as easily as oceans swell. But there was a hesitancy to his progress, a strange looseness in his limbs. Something had happened to the tiger that he could not understand. He paced uneasily with lowered head and flattened ears. It wasn't simply that he'd left his territory. It seemed as if he'd strayed from something even more important than that, a kind of path. He had been born on this path and had walked it all his life. It was the path of greatest advantage, where his feet fell the softest, and the cover was greatest, and the light tricked every eye but his. Never wider than the length of his whiskers, never louder than the snapping of a twig, the unrelenting path of the hunter who knows he is also the hunted. Now he stood as though lost, his mind blunted by confusion. Something had happened. The tiger remembered only snatches, the dawn air full of the cries of men, a hammering of feet, the long grass beaten to a storm. He twisted, crouching to meet the threat, teeth bared. Then a stinging at his neck, and the ground shifting as if turned to swamp. Weakness seized him. He toppled and lay flat, felt the tremor of approaching steps. A shadow crossed his body. It smelled of something he had never come across before, a bitter, ashy scent, deep-laid and sickly stale. The tiger knew it was the smell of death. He rolled, caught the ground and bounded clear. He ran. He ran through a tunnel of fear, never reaching the light, the trees blurring and changing shape until his hind legs buckled beneath him. He snarled and hauled himself forwards, vast shoulders straining, the snap and crash of branches a dim roar in his head. He was slipping, falling headlong into empty space. Water carried him. Daylight. He lay high up on the bank, under thin cover, his eyes fixed on a figure at the river's edge. It sat with its back to him, the size of a monkey, hunched like a monkey too, the same intent angle of the head. The tiger felt no hunger. He was too dazed for that. But his mind briefly cleared with a relief so strong it was almost gratitude. This he knew, this. The intent crouch and the locked gaze, the inching advance. Each step the sum of 1,000 calculations leading to a single deadly point. He blinked and pulled back his head. He was mistaken. It was not... He heard a shrill cry. A stone struck his side, and he staggered, terrified by his own loss of balance. He wheeled and tumbled down the riverbank, clawing at the spinning sky. He swam, his huge paws beating beneath him, making for the opposite bank, and scrambled out, water shooting off his back. Then he set off, his pace dogged, yet aimless, his senses dulled. He had been walking like this for several hours when he finally arrived at the meadow. Now he paused, uncertain of direction, and swung his head slowly around, catching, too late, the movement in the corner of his eye. That's all I've got time to read today. I hope you enjoyed it.